Assalamualaikum everyone and Dr. Salmi. I will explain the anatomy of female reproductive system. This is a 3D of female reproductive system. Female reproductive system include all of internal and external organs that help with reproduction. The internal sex organ are the ovaries, which are the female gonads. The fallopian tube, which is two muscular tubes that connect the ovaries to the uterus. The uterus is the strong muscular set that a fetus can develop in. The neck of the uterus is called the cervix, and it protrudes into the vagina. At the opening of the vagina are the external sex organs, and these are usually called the genitals, and they in the vulvar region. They include the labia, the clitoris, and the mons pubis. The ovaries. Ovaries produce sex hormones such as estrogen and progesterone as well as ova, commonly called egg. Ova are produced from oocyte cells that slowly develop throughout a woman's early life and reach maturity after puberty. A matured ovum releases each month during ovulation. The ovum travels from the ovaries to the fallopian tube. Fallopian tube. The first part is the fimbriae, which are the finger-like projections that surround the ovary and guide the secondary oocyte into the fallopian tube. Next is the infundibulum and then the ampulla region, which is where fertilization typically happens between the secondary oocyte and the sperm. This is the magical spot where they meet, which curve around the ovary, and finally the isthmus region, which open to the uterine cavity. On the outside, the fallopian tube are covered by peritoneum and supported by the mesosalpine, which is part of the broad ligament. On the inside, the fallopian tube has smooth muscle with an inner lining that has ciliated cells that slowly sweep the secondary oocyte or zygote towards the uterus.
Next, the uterus. The uterus is a hollow, muscular, and pear-shaped organ located posterior and superior to the urinary bladder. Uterus was included by fundus, body, and cervix. Uterus connected to the two fallopian tubes and its superior end and to the vagina on its inferior end. The uterus is also known as the womb as it surrounds and supports the developing fetus during pregnancy. Uterus has three layers, that is perimetrium, which is continuous with peritoneal cavity. Second, the myometrium, which is made of smooth muscle contrast in childbirth. The third one is endometrium, that is support the embryo during early development. Then vagina. The vagina had a muscular wall and is covered by an inner mucosa with ridges that run along it. The vagina is the passageway for the baby during childbirth, and it opens up into the vulva. In childhood, a thin sheet of vaginal mucosa called the hymen partially covers the vaginal opening, and it can break because of exercise, the use of tampon, or sexual intercourse. The external sex organs is the vulva. The labia majora, which called the two greater lips, labia minora, called the two smaller lips. Mons pubis, or the mountain of the pubis, and the clitoris, a small erectile organ that develops from the some embryonic tissue as the male penis. It is hooded by a skin fold called the clitoral hood. Both the labia majora and the mons pubis become covered in pubic hair during puberty. The labia majora cover the labia minora, and between the two labia minora there is a space called the vulvar vestibule that includes the opening of the vagina and the urethral opening.
Ovarian cycle and fertilization. Ovarian cycle. Follicular phases taking place from menstruation to ovulation, which is day 1 to day 14. Luteal phases occurs from day 14 to day 28. This from ovulation to before menstruation. Follicular and luteal phase diagram. We are using this for my map. Now, I want to talk about ovarian cycle. Ovarian cycle, which includes the follicular and luteal phases. First phases is follicular phases. Begin with follicle. Follicles contain developing ovaries. Follicle going to be in this phase called primordial, number 1 on diagram. The follicular cells, these primordial follicles, begin to develop around the oocyte and differentiate into these cells called granulocyte. The primordial follicle is now considered a primary follicle. This stage of development is now called parenteral, during which the granulocyte cells secrete zona pellucida. At zona pellucida, some connective tissue will differentiate to form theca. Some follicles do not develop beyond this stage, but some follicles continue developing and form antrum. Antrum is a fluid cavity, number 3 on diagram. The follicle is now called a secondary follicle. The stage of development is called early antrum stage or follicle antrum stage. Some follicles do not develop beyond this stage. In follicle either parenteral or early antrum stage, one follicle is selected to develop to maturity. It is called dominant follicle. It continues development into late antrum, where the antrum grows much larger and some granulocyte cells from this layer and others form corona, radiata, and cumulus ovaries. The follicle is now called Graafian follicle, number 4 on diagram. Meiosis 1 is completed. Now we are dealing with secondary oocyte. Secondary oocyte to float freely in the antrum. The luteal phase, last phase. The luteal phase begins with ovulation, where the Graafian follicle ruptures. Number 5 on diagram. The secondary oocyte travels to then enters the uterine tube. The ruptured follicle is transformed into corpus luteum and secretes estrogen and progesterone. Do you know how fertilization happens? 10 millions of sperm travel through vagina, cervix, and fallopian tube. All the sperm move forward by wiggling their tails. One sperm merges with ovum in fallopian tube. Ovum is burst by a sperm. It hardens and becomes impermeable to other sperm. Sperm sheds the tail is no longer neat. Genetic material of egg and sperm join together, start dividing, form a peristosis. Fallopian tube to uterus, where it implants itself and continues developing.
A woman's body goes through a number of changes each month between puberty and menopause to prepare for a possible pregnancy. This series of hormone-driven events is called the menstrual cycle.
Menstrual cycle begins when an egg from the previous cycle is not fertilized because no pregnancy has occurred. Then estrogen and progesterone levels drop. The thickened uterine lining that will have supported a pregnancy is no longer required, so it sheds through your vagina. During your period, your uterus expels a mixture of blood, mucus, and tissue. The follicle phase begins when the hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland to release follicle-stimulating hormone. This hormone causes your ovaries to produce 5 to 20 small sacs known as follicles. Each follicle contains a developing egg, but only the healthiest egg will mature. On a rare occasion, a woman will have 2 mature eggs. Then, the remaining follicles will be absorbed by your body. The maturing follicles cause an increase in estrogens, which thicken the uterine lining. In the follicular phase, rising estrogens level cause your pituitary gland to release luteinizing hormone, and it initiates the ovulation process. Ovulation occurs when your ovaries release a mature egg. The egg travels down the fallopian tubes toward the uterus to be fertilized by sperm. If the egg is not fertilized within a day, it will die or twist off. The ovulation phase is the only time during a menstrual cycle when you can become pregnant. Corpus luteum develops after the follicles release its egg. This structure secretes hormone. primarily progesterone and some estrogen. The increase in the hormones keep your uterine lining thick and ready for a fertilized egg to implant. In the event that you become pregnant, your body will produce human chorionic gonadotropin. This is the hormone detected by pregnancy tests. It aids in the maintenance of the corpus luteum and the thickness of the uterine lining. If you do not become pregnant, the corpus luteum shrinks and is reabsorbed. This causes a drop in estrogens and progesterone level, resulting in the onset of your period. During your period, the uterine lining will shake and menstrual cycle occur.
So I will explain to you guys about hormone control of the female.
At puberty, the hypothalamus secretes gonadotropin, which is releasing hormone GnRH, and then GnRH will activate the pituitary glands to produce and secrete follicle stimulation hormone FSH and luteinizing hormone LH. And then FSH and LH will travel to the blood to the ovaries and stimulate the production of estrogen and progesterone.
Estrogen stimulates growth of the female reproductive system, menstruation starts, and causes the development of female secondary sex characteristics. For example, breast development, hair growth around genitals and under the arms, and increase in body fat. Next is progesterone, involved in the preparation of uterus for pregnancy and the breast for lactation.
Menstrual cycle takes about 28 days and can be divided into 4 phases. The first flow phase, which lasts for about 5 days, this is followed by the follicular phase from day 6 until 13, the ovulatory phase on day 14, and finally the luteal phase for the remaining 14 days.
So we're gonna look at each of these phases individually. So the flow phase is when the menstruation occurs, which is shedding of the endometrium, the lining of the uterus. And the reason this is the beginning of the cycle is because you can tell when it's happening, right? Because it's happened externally, so that marks of the beginning of the cycle.
Next is follicular phase. The first thing that happens is that FSH stimulates the development of follicles within the ovary. So follicles are groups of cells in the ovary that contain and provide nutrients to the egg. As the follicle develop, they start to secrete estrogen, then acts on the uterus to stimulate the thickening of the endometrium and increase the blood supply in preparation for pregnancy. So in the follicular phase, FSH from the anterior pituitary has acted on the ovary. The ovary has started to produce estrogen, which is thickening the lining. In the next phase, the estrogen also acts on the pituitary glands to cause it to secrete luteinizing hormone. So once estrogen level have reached a certain point, the pituitary glands start secreting luteinizing hormone, which also open the ovary and causes ovulation. So the increase in the luteinizing hormone causes the egg to release from the follicle, which is held within the ovary. Last phase, we had LH causing ovulation in the luteal phase. The LH continues to act on the remaining follicle cell and it transforms them into a functioning corpus luteum. And what this corpus luteum start to do is secrete progesterone, which hasn't been secreted yet, and some more estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen continue to stimulate the development of the endometrium, and progesterone also act in a negative fashion to inhibit the development of other follicles. Final thing that progesterone does it act as an inhibitor on the anterior pituitary to cause a decreased production of luteinizing hormone. As those level of luteinizing hormone decrease, the corpus luteum start to degenerate, it stop producing progesterone and estrogen, so they are no longer acting on the endometrium, causing it to thicken. So when those estrogen and progesterone level go down, menstruation occurs and the cycle starts all over again. That's all from me. Thank you.